Well, looky there. Look who came back to come see me some more. Rock on. This is great. Welcome back to episode 3, which I called Sea Road to Port Nyanzaru. We left off last episode, with our 5 party members boarding a ship that was bound for the port. They were leaving Ahoy Hoy and heading towards where they were originally going before the whole fiasco with the teleportation circle and all that craziness. Back to Port Nyanzaru. So it should be about a 3-day journey up the coast. They were should be very calm. There's no storms, no any kind of problems. So they were just all relaxing, which, as you know, is the worst thing in the world to do. By the way, thank you so much for watching this video. Sometimes I forget, and I just want to let you know how excited I am. We've got so many subscribers now, so please take a second. Hit that like button. It's just going to make you feel good. It's going to make me feel good. Everything's going to work just fine. So thank you for that. All right. So lots of crazy stuff happens on this little water journey, as I'm sure you're not surprised at all to hear. As they're heading out into the open ocean, they can hear this drumming sound, this thumping, real deep bass tones coming. They couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Then they realized it's coming from underwater, and off to the ocean side, away from the side where so the Cholt is to the west of them. Cholt is to the east of them. They're heading north. Off to the west, out in the ocean, these 3 huge storm giants start kind of emerging from the water, and they're just hammering their drums and chanting some horrible, terrifying thing. And as the whole boat is just looking out there in full terror, all the giants stop, and all 3 of them look exactly right at them. And instantly, just a tempest, a huge gale storm, wind and rain and lightning and thunder. It was terrifying, and lasted all night. The next day, they kind of woke up. The sails were tattered. Several of the crew members had been swept overboard. Worse yet, all of their rations had been ruined with seawater and either washed away or just completely contaminated. So they had nothing to eat. Luckily, Fizzbang was able to use magic to mend the sails, so they at least had some kind of way to transport themselves with the wind. But it was very, very dead, no wind. And the captain had no idea what. They couldn't see land anywhere. They were out in the middle of the ocean. The captain was confident that come night, if it was a clear night, she would be able to navigate by the stars and figure out exactly where they were. But until then, it was just aimlessly sailing. A few hours go by, and the lookout yells out a very unexpected thing. He yells, "Tree!" And everyone was so confused. They couldn't figure out what he was talking about. They rush to the side of the ship, and they look out off the bow, and 50 yards away, there's a full-on flowering tree, really more of a bush, coming up out of the water, green leaves, little, they could tell there were little berries on it, and nothing. There's no island, there's no rock, there's no nothing. This tree is growing straight up out of the middle of the ocean. They pull the ship over so they can get close to it, and to Fizzbang's delight and surprise, he realizes that this is a Gummiberry bush, which is the thing he had come to Cholt to find. And he didn't even take a second to logically think that, it didn't bother him one bit that he had found what he was looking for growing out of the open ocean. The crew was famished. They saw the berries. Fizzbang ran over, started harvesting all the berries, and everyone was just gorging themselves on these delicious berries. They were happy. They were happy that they got them. Fizzbang was delighted that he had found what he was looking for. Later that evening, as they all began to kind of take their shifts at sleeping, they realized that they could not sleep. Sleep was impossible to them. And this went on for 2 or 3 days where, the skies were cloudy at night, so they couldn't tell where they were. None of them were able to sleep, and they just became exhausted. And it became very clear that whatever they had eaten, whatever these berries had been, had a bad side to them. On the 3rd day, Czyzz had kind of pulled himself up to the crow's nest to kind of use his sharp eyes to see if they could find anything that would help them. And he looked to the side and he saw something that he just couldn't believe. So he, scratched his eyes a little bit and, slapped his face a little bit and tried to look out. And what he saw was a Chultan gentleman, a man dressed in a very, very nice suit, a very nice traveling cloak, and a little riding hat, floating across on the tip of a finger of water. So suspended on the top of this, 20-foot tall kind of finger of water, this little jolly man was just floating by. Czyzz couldn't believe it. He was sure he was hallucinating. As he tried to yell out to let people know to see it, it turned and it came right towards them. And it traveled so quickly that almost instantly it was right next to him, and it kind of entered onto the ship and lowered the little man, and he tapped right down onto the deck as if just walking down a stair. And he was so excited to see them, and he just talked and talked and talked about all the things that he'd done and seen and how great it was to have friends again. And it was obvious that he hadn't talked to anyone in a long, long time, and he was very happy to have company. Very shortly, he realized that his new company was exhausted almost to death. So he asked them a little bit about what was going on, and they told him that they, 3 or 4 days ago, they'd found this tree that was growing out of the ocean, and they ate from it, and they couldn't sleep anymore. And the little man just shook his head, and he's like, "She's at it again." "One moment, please." And without any explanation, he dove off the ship into the water. They rushed to the side to see what he was doing, and he did not come back up. And they all looked at each other as if for sure this had been a hallucination. Not 2 hours later, up came the water spout right next to their ship and dropped off the little man. He was standing there right in their midst, not a drop on him, completely dry, everything was, as if it had properly been wired or been ironed. Everything was just, top notch. And he had 2 hands full of seaweed, and he said, "Eat this." And so everybody got a bite of it, and everybody instantly started feeling better. They didn't feel as exhausted. They had a little bit more energy, and they were satiated. They weren't hungry any longer. And he kind of started talking again super fast about all the things and how the beautiful day was and how the water's gorgeous and that they can see the clouds and all this kind of stuff. And just offhandedly mentioned that there was a sea hag who loves messing with people. And she had created that tree and poisoned them. And he had gone down and talked to her and got the antidote and came back up. Everyone was excited about that, but still a little hesitant about this weird little guy that had showed up and who seemed to have some pretty amazing powers. After a little while longer, after telling some stories and asking about all of them and seeing how they were doing, he said, "Well, it's time for me to leave." Jumped back over the water again into the ocean. Out behind them, popped up on this finger of water about 50 feet up in the air. And he said, "Thank you so much for your companionship. Let me help you get to where you're going." And instantly turned into a bronze dragon who'd been in disguise. And 2 or 3 huge flaps of his wings, and the sail filled, and they just shot off in the right direction. And towards the end of that day, they turned the corner into the Bay of Chult, and the captain knew exactly where they were. The dragon completely disappeared without any trace, and for the rest of the trip, they just told each other the same story back and forth about how crazy it was that a dragon had saved them from the ocean. So as they pulled into the Bay of Chult, it was possible to see the port city of Nyanzaru quite a ways down the coast, but It was the only thing that the coast was all completely green and lush and deep, deep jungle. But they could tell that there was one point ahead that was civilization, and that's where they were heading. As they came close, they started to smell the city. And it wasn't a dank, awful, disgusting city like most of the other cities on the Sword Coast. It was a vibrant, warm, fruit-filled smell, and they began to hear almost the song of the city. I mean, it was obviously a place like they had never seen before. So as they were fully enraptured and looking and hoping to get to the city, it was still quite a ways away. But off to the side, off to the east side of the ship, the water began to mound up, and all of the crew yelled very focused screams, and several of them went down under the ship, and the captain ordered to pull the sails. The ship kind of stopped fairly close, uncomfortably close to this mound of water that was coming up. So up out of this mound of water emerges this gigantic, monstrous turtle face, and it is a dragon turtle. Its name is Aramag, and completely dwarfs the ship. The party members are terrified. They had no warning of what was going on, and they were even more terrified that the crew didn't seem to be doing anything to evade or escape or prepare to attack or defend against this monster. Then from below decks come up several crew members carrying a very heavy chest, and in it, they opened it up, and in it is just full of riches, coins and jewels and necklaces and all kinds of things, just weighing this thing down. And they brought it up to the side, and they threw it overboard towards the giant dragon turtle. The dragon turtle kind of moved around and splashed, and the ship at this point is getting bucked up and down by these waves. And finally, this monstrous voice comes out and says, "Not enough." And they're all terrified that their offering wasn't enough. And so the sailors start, going through their pockets and, going through the pouches that they have and throwing just loose change overboard. And they all yell at the party members, "Whatever you've got, throw it in the water." And the party members didn't have much money to start with, but they were a little miserly about wanting to throw it in and hesitant. But Han was really the only person on the ship who was not terrified, but was completely enraptured by this dragon turtle. He couldn't take his eyes off her, and it was just, he was transfixed by it, and so in awe of her beauty and magnitude that he emptied all of the change he had. Anything that was left over from when they got from the hunt master, and he just started throwing all the coins overboard. And finally, the monstrous rumble said, "Enough," and she just went back under the waves. And Han was standing there with just a tear down his eyes that he had seen such an amazing, gorgeous, beautiful creature. Everyone else was terrified and kind of ticked that they had to throw their treasure overboard. But apparently this is the custom, that this dragon turtle waits outside the city and exacts his tribute upon any ship that comes in. Finally, they pull into port, and it's a very, very well built and well used port facility. This is very much a city of commerce, and again, the sound of the city is so different from any of the other old, dreary, musty smelling cities of Neverwinter or Baldur's Gate. This is a vibrant, tropical, gorgeous place. The buildings are of bright colors and covered in mosaics. There are water features everywhere. Kind of looks almost like they built fountains that moved as the water came out, and the water, as it hit different things, it would make musical notes, and everything was just beautiful, and they were very, very excited to be there. They pulled up into the dock. They go down the gangplank, and the first thing that they see waddling up to them is a golden dragonborn named Zindar. He's the portmaster. Most of them had seen a dragonborn before, but none of them had ever seen a portly dragonborn. And he was quite portly. He waddled up to him, and they tried not to stare at his huge paunch, but he started to ask them if they'd seen any pirates, if how their journey was, if they have any problems. They quickly recounted the teleportation circle, but the fact that, or the teleportation device that had taken them on such a side quest, and but assured him that it had been destroyed. He was very nervous about the pirates that they had seen and the different things that they had to deal with. And he told them that there's a bounty. There are several pirate ships that are operating somewhere along the coast. They weren't able to ever get, never able to track them down. But that there was a huge bounty, 2,000 for each ship and 5,000 or 500 for each captain that they brought in. So with that information, he waddled off to the next ship. They all looked at each other like, we're going to have to go, we got no money. We threw almost everything we had into the water, and so that the dragon turtle wouldn't eat us. And so they were sitting kind of there on the deck or on the dock, trying to figure out what their next move was. And then behind them, coming off the same ship they were just on, was a person that they had never seen. They were on the ship for days and days and days, and they never had seen this person. He was very dandy, very fancy, and flamboyantly dressed, and someone behind him was carrying a trunk full of something heavy, because it was taking a couple people to carry it. My name is Volothan Gindar. My friends call me Volo. I'm a writer of books, teller of stories, drinker of flagons, and all-around good guy. I've just written a new book. It's called Volo's Guide to Monsters, and I'm here to sell it, and I'm here to bless this continent with my literary works. Now that you have a second, would you like to buy one of these books? And they all kind of looked at each other like, first of all, we didn't know he was on there, and now he's selling us books. Han somehow dug deep into his pocket and was able to find the 25 gold that Volo was asking for his guide to monsters, and bought it and instantly started leafing through it. Well, Volo was so excited that they had stopped to talk to him that he decided to tell them a little bit about Port Nyanzaru. He'd asked if they'd ever been, nobody ever had, so he wanted to fill him in a little bit. He talked about Chult and how it was formed by the god Ubtao. Had created the jungles and created the majesty of Chult, and it also created the dinosaurs. And he was the god of this land for eons, until the humans, the Chultans that lived here, became too greedy and too violent and too self-centered for him to even be able to stand them any longer. So Ubtao, the creator of Chult, abandoned the peninsula. And that vacuum allowed 9 lesser gods, tricksters really, to enter the continent and kind of enter the theology of Chult. And each one of them represented a different outlook on life and a different struggle and a different reward. And slowly they worked their way into the pantheon of the gods that were worshipped on this land. He also mentioned that there had been some real troubles with the Yuan-Ti population, and that a particularly evil paladin named Raznisi had actually transformed himself into a Yuan-Ti and had unleashed an undead epidemic on the continent. He had raised zombie undead warriors across the entire peninsula and just ravaged the countryside and ravaged the cities. For the most part, he'd been eventually put down, but he was never destroyed fully, and his undead handiwork continues to ravage the jungles and fill the nightmares of everyone in Chult. Volo also talked a little bit about Port Nyanzaru, the city, and how it was governed, and that it was governed by merchant princes who all took care of different parts of the the economy and all of the merchandise and commerce that went on in the city. He mentioned that if the marketplaces and the nobility of Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter ever found out and truly realized how much money flowed through this little port, they'd be quite shocked and quite jealous. Natural resources, gemstones, dinosaurs, everything, the resources were immense here in Chult. And Port Nyanzaru was a thriving capital, to be sure, but really it's the only city left in all of Chult. There were several huge cities. I mean, it was a very vast empire of cities connected by well-maintained roads and technology and just might. And through the people's lack of belief in Ubtao, through their petty jealousies and their petty wars, really the only inhabited place on the entire peninsula is Port Nyanzaru. With that, he told them that he was going to be staying at the Thundering Lizard Inn, and they were more than welcome to come and meet with him, and he would tell them more stories and they could buy him a drink. From there, the party kind of split up, trying to figure out what they were going to do next, and just agreed that they would show up at that inn that Volo had mentioned. Three of the party members, Fizzbang, Han, and Czyzz, as they were walking down the pier, were motioned over by a kind of a shady-looking fellow. As they walked over to him, he told them a story that he was trying to collect a gambling debt from a man named Galen, who owed 500 gold pieces, and that if the party members could help him recover that money, he would give them 10% of that payment as a finder's fee. Being strapped for cash, they decided they had to do it. He kind of knew, he gave them some hints of where they were. It was kind of in the back alley. Turns out Galen was a former gladiator and a fairly formidable adversary. He had two short swords that he wielded with his giant muscular arms, and they started out trying to take him down, and it was quite the battle, but it was obvious that he was stronger than them. It was only through some really lucky moves, high rolls, that they were able to finally get him down to where he was just about to go unconscious. At that point, he begged for his life and said, "Hey, I don't really owe this money. I was courting this family's sister, and she's awful, and so I stopped courting them. They're insulted. They keep telling all these stories trying to get me killed. If you spare my life, I pledge my fealty to you, and I will help you in any way I can." They were struck by that story and told him that he was more than welcome to come along with them. So they patched up his wounds, and the four of them walked down the street and eventually met up with the other members at the Thundering Lizard. While they were in the tavern, all they could hear people talking about were the dinosaur races that were starting the next day, and they were intrigued by this. And it was explained to them that it was a huge citywide event, that they roped off all these streets, and the course of the race is through all the streets around the city, and all kinds of different dinosaurs raced, and there was betting, and there was all kinds of cheering and celebrations. So the party members were obviously very excited to hear about that and very interested in it. So the next day, the party went out and found themselves a spot to see the dinosaur races. And the first race was the four-legged race, and all these dinosaurs were just thundering around with their riders on top. And it was a great time. They all bet. A couple of them won some money, a couple of them lost some money. After that race, the next race was going to be the two-legged race, and there was a little bit of time so that they could get all the dinosaurs lined up and everything. And off to the side, they could see two people, two Chultan men, wrestling with a Deinonychus dinosaur, just kind of like a velociraptor, but a little bigger. And it was obviously they had painted this dinosaur up to be in the race, but the dinosaur was not having any of it. and didn't appear to be very well trained, and was whipping him around with the ropes that are around his neck, and the people were falling down, and they just couldn't get back up, and they were yelling and swearing at this thing. So Fizzbang, being in touch with nature and in his druidic side, was able to chat with the dinosaur and talk to the people and get a good price for them. They felt like they were. It was obvious that they knew they were swindling this poor little gnome by making him, tricking him into buying this horrible animal. But in Fizzbang's protection, the dinosaur was very docile and very, very obedient and very happy to be with him. Her name was Jungle Princess, and she became another member of the party. Fizzbang, with his new dinosaur, decided he would enter the last race, which was the no-holds-barred, full contact race with every kind of dinosaur. So he entered the race and probably didn't follow the rules all that well, cast quite a bit of spells on his dinosaur and others as silently and stealthily as he could, and caused some dinosaurs to, instead of attack him, attack somebody else, and in the end he was able to win the race. The officials were not able to prove that he had cheated, but they were sure that he had, so they banned him from any future race. But even before the ban took place, all of his friends had collected on their winnings, and they took that all to the tavern and had a great old time. And that, my friends, is the way that the party got from way down at the snout of Agmar to the beautiful city of Port Nyanzaru and their adventures on the first day. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a whole lot more to come, so please subscribe, like, comment, open your window and yell out that people should be watching this YouTube channel. I just appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Rock on.